All right. Hey, and welcome to the FanPower Podcast, where we talk about fan engagement through the lens of first-party and zero-party data. Today, I am joined by Grant Cohen, the Chief Growth Officer and co-founder at Fan-Controlled Sports and Entertainment, formerly Fan-Controlled Football. Grant, welcome. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and about Fan-Controlled Sports and Entertainment.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am, as you mentioned, the co-founder and chief growth officer of Fan-Controlled Sports Entertainment. That is quite a mouthful. I'm a Scorpio. I like tropical vacations. I mean, I don't know what else you need from me. So we started this business, me and two other tech geeks, if you will. My background's in mobile ad tech, the distribution and monetization of mobile apps and games. And then our fourth co-founder is a former NFL player. We started the business handful of years ago, originally by buying a arena football team. That was kind of our proof of concept, where we tested out this model of fan-controlled football. We eventually expanded. That went so well that we ended up starting our own league and have eventually expanded that. And now we're spreading our wings into new sports and other areas as we are fan-controlled sports and kind of all-encompassing. But the same core concept is the same. We're trying to create a more interactive sports viewing experience for the fans where they actually participate as part of their favorite team. That's awesome.
So I've been, obviously I've known about you guys for a few years, probably since your inception in 20. But there's two things that have struck me from a founder perspective. One, I could tell you were from the world of product or tech because you quite literally bought a team as a proof of concept, basically an MVP. And so I'd love to hear the thinking behind that. But before we get into that, what was the origination story? Were you guys sitting there saying there has to be a better way to do this? Like, where did it start? Yeah,
I mean, depends on which one of us you ask. You get a slightly different story. My story is the right one. So you've come to the right place. So for me, it actually started, funnily enough, with three other friends, not the three who have, at that time I didn't know my current three co-founders. They've since become great friends, but we have three friends from college, and we were sitting in a bar in New York a long time ago, a decade and a half ago, watching a baseball game, and the idea just stuck. It was, just sitting around a bar watching a game, and you start talking about things that the manager is doing or decisions they've made, and saying you could do a better job. And it's just this, we started talking about this idea of like, well, could the fans actually do better? Like, not one, right? Like, one single fan probably isn't going to be better than a coach who has a lifetime experience. But like, collectively, if all the fans collectively are making the decision and it was like appropriately rewarded, and this cream, the cream rises to the top, and the best fans had the most power, would they be smarter than a single coach or single dude who can be, biased and blah, blah. And that was the idea behind it. And we toiled around with it. Talked about buying a minor league team, never ended up doing it. And then fast forward almost a decade later, and who ended up becoming the co-founders of this business, sort of found me and some stuff I'd published about it online many, many years earlier. Like I said, I'd been working in the mobile app and game ad tech space. I'd started another business. It was about to be acquired. So I had a little bit of free time and a little bit of money. And I was like, let's go buy a football team. And the idea was very much, this would be our proof of concept, but our original thought wasn't that we were going to start our own league. It was that we were going to start with this one team, and then we were going to expand and get the rest of the league to come on board with us. And we realized very quickly that was a possibility. Like the product market fit was clear from the jump. Like literally very first game, teams in the league that we played in was called the Indoor Football League. It still exists. Average, at least back then, 1,000 to 2,000 live streams per game. We did over 100,000 on our first game. And we're like, oh, wait a minute. And like, they're getting a couple thousand people in their stadium, and we sold out like 7,000. We're like, whoa, hold on. And we had no other reason. Like, the only differentiating factor was the fans called the plays. If anything, when you're an expansion team in a league like that, your numbers should be way worse because you don't have a built-in install fan base. You don't have built-in sponsors, blah, blah. And so we realized really quickly that it worked. There were a lot of challenges for applying it into a league that had a more rigid structure and wasn't necessarily, we thought there were things you could do above and beyond just the like basics of fans voting and calling plays that could accelerate sort of the fan controlledness, if you will, of the sport, the interactivity and the future proofing of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it just frankly made more business sense for us to start our own league.
Yep.
And so that's what we did. We took another year or two to putz around and raise money and figure our stuff out and get ourselves off the ground. But then in the height of the pandemic, we launched season 1. And then last year we expanded, doubled our number of our teams, doubled all of our kind of basic metrics, more than doubled our revenue and some of the most important KPIs, and expanded. And now we're looking at doing other sports as well.
I love that. So before we jump into the other sports, because I want to talk about the evolution of fan controlled football to fan controlled sports and entertainment. What, you're kind of, you're doing everything backwards, right? Everything is very different from how the traditional leagues do it, in the sense that the ownership is calling the plays and the ownership is primarily fans. But what you're also doing is you're leaning into the evolution of brand, right? Where you've got team owners that have a large social presence, that have a brand outside of sport primarily, though you do have athletes as team owners. How important has that been to the expansion or even like brand awareness of fan controlled football?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one thing I want to note, there is a difference in ours between what the fans are not. We did do some equity crowdfunding, so there are some fans that own parts of the team. But by and large, the millions of fans who are watching our games, the hundreds of thousands who've downloaded our app and are calling plays, the overwhelming majority of those are not the owners. Those fans are acting as the GM and the coach, which is not unlike traditional sports, right? The GM and the coach typically are not the owner of the team. There are different roles within the organization. The owners, in our case, the league is the primary owner of, and the holding company is the primary owner of all the teams as we create new teams. And then we do have individual investors. We have a handful of fans, and then we have what is most notably celebrity team owners. Honestly, that was sort of born out of necessity. What we learned with our proof of concept team in Salt Lake is that one of the major challenges to starting a new sports league is the operational cost of being in lots of different cities is really high, right? You're basically, if you have an 8-team league, you're basically starting 9 businesses when you consider the league's centralized operations, and 8 different markets. That's 8 different arenas or stadiums you have to have rent deals with, 8 different marketing teams, medical staff, coaching staff, equipment, like all these things just become really, you're just way too capital and resource intensive for starting a new business, right? Like I said, we all come from like the tech startup world. That seemed crazy to us. And then just the travel costs alone, it seemed, for a business where we weren't as focused on traditional revenue streams of ticket sales, merch sales, concessions, we looked at that and we're like, that's not really as scalable. You can scale way more a digital streaming online viewership fan base than you can a in-person where you literally have physical constraints. So for us, we said it just makes much more sense if everyone's in one place. It can be much more cost effective. But if everyone's in one place, you don't have the traditional team model of location-based or school, university-based fandom. So honestly, it was, like I said, born out of necessity. We said, well, what makes sense? And we looked at individual sports and said, well, there's a lot of individual sports where you're a fan of a certain athlete. And that has nothing to do with where they're from. I love Tiger Woods, a big Roger Federer fan. I've been to Switzerland once, right? Like I don't live in Jupiter, Florida, or, it doesn't have anything to do with where those people are from. It has to do with their brand and their style. Now, both of those guys happen to be really good, but like I like Federer a lot more than I like Nadal. I don't know why, just something about his style and the way he plays and his brand that is more interesting to me. I've actually spent much more time in Spain than I have Switzerland, so it doesn't make any logical sense, right? If you go the location route. So we really took the same approach and said, all right, let's build our teams. And we started off by saying, this is football, so we should really focus on current and former NFL players that can kind of lend us that credibility. And we literally just made the rounds and talked to anyone and everyone we possibly knew in that world to start develop relationship. And we were lucky that there were a few folks who sort of saw the vision and saw the future and joined early. I'm wearing one of our teams is called the Glacier Boys. I'm wearing a Glacier Boys shirt today. And Richard Sherman, who is the NFL player as part of the Glacier Boys, was actually our very first celebrity owner who came in. He was, at the time, he had just signed with the Niners and was still playing. He's since retired. He introduced us to Marshawn, who then joined, and then all of a sudden starts to build and grow from there. But the cool part is that each of these teams has its own style. And like Richard and Marshawn, even though they're friends, didn't want to be on the same team. They thought it was more fun to be on different teams. And they have very different styles. Richard is swag and cool and shit talking and brash, right? Marshawn is more like just gonna punch you in your mouth and be tough, right? So the Glacier Boys, Richard's team, his other owners, to your point, are not necessarily athletes. It's Quavo, the rapper. It's Destroying, who's a YouTuber who used to play football. And it's guys who have a very similar style of that swag, cool, brash style. And then Marshawn's team is like the tough, hard-nosing teams. Like one of his co-owners is a guy named Miro, who's an AEW wrestler. The two of them never knew each other before we did this, but they're a similar big, bad, tough style, right? And their team's the Beast. And then he's also brought along his cousin, Marcus Peters, who brought along his friend, Todd Gurley, who's all part of the Beast. So it's really neat to see these ownership groups come together. And then a byproduct of that, as we started doing it, we thought to ourselves, well, heck, you know what's really great about this is we're also going to get really awesome distribution. And I think the owners help a lot on content creation and awareness, which ultimately drives acquisition and engagement. Because as a fan for this relatively new league, especially when we first started, we can have Marshawn, although he doesn't like to do a lot of interviews. That's his whole thing, right? I'm just here to not get fined. But he does on stuff that he likes and is cool. And luckily, this is one of those things. Or Richard, who's great and does tons of press and media for it. They'll come to the venue, they'll shake hands, kiss babies, give the fans sort of extra added element of excitement, social content, all that good stuff, which really helps drive, like I said, that awareness and acquisition for us.
That's awesome. Obviously from a brand awareness perspective, creating brands around the celebrity ownership is awesome. It shows on the field, it shows through the ownership group, it shows in the branding. The stat that blew me away, I was reading the Harvard Business Review article on you guys recently, and the stat that blew me away was the 75% engagement rate during voting, I believe on Wednesdays during the draft voting.
Oh, no, that's period. Of people who have downloaded our app, it's actually more. It's like 76% have voted at least once, and then it's like a shockingly high number vote multiple times. Now, part of that's a user experience, right? We've built the user experience, so the first thing we're trying to get you to do. Now, you have to come in. Historically, you had to come in and register, and then we'd prompt you to vote. We're actually changing that now, where we're not requiring a registration. Because historically, we only had one league and you join one team. Now we have multiple leagues and teams. So we want you to take the time to be able to say, oh, I want a basketball or football or whatever other sport we're doing. So we're opening it up a little more and providing more content before the kind of reg wall, if you will. We create an anonymized account in the background. So if any actions you do take, you still get the points for them once you do pick your team. But historically, it was part of what we prompted you for. So it's not that shocking it was a high rate. But honestly, I come from mobile app and game marketing world where a large amount of the downloads you receive never do anything, right? They download it and the app sits in their phone and it either never gets opened or gets opened once and they kill it. So the idea that we have such a high percentage, I think is very promising for the business. Honestly, one of the major reasons for that is that we've been lucky to have seen a pretty, luck's probably the wrong word, but we have successfully seen a fair amount of organic growth. A very small percentage of our users have actually come from traditional paid media. And then the interesting thing about the paid media part is those users, that cohort, behaves almost identically to the non-attributed or organic users that come in. And I do think a big part of that is the celebrity appeal and awareness that is able to be generated. So people aren't coming in totally unqualified, but sort of like, oh yeah, this thing, I know about that. I saw this person post about it. I saw this article, blah, blah, and have kind of a reason to be engaged. And honestly, it's just fun.
Yeah.
We make it really fun for fans. That's the point.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. It's fun to watch the game. It's fun to participate in the game, and typically that is a challenge for traditional leagues. It's fun when you're there. They do a lot to invest in the experience around it, but there's a lot of distractions when you're not there. You guys are making it fun when you're not there as well.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Giving people stuff to do, not just on game day. I mean, out of the millions and millions of votes that we've had at this point, I think only half, or maybe even less than half now. It was getting close to it, and now we've been out of season, so it's the non-live have added up. But over half our votes, or close to, are not happening on game days. They're happening all different times of the day, week, year, right? So our goal is really to have an experience that fans can participate in 24/7, 365, where because you're not logistically can't be live playing sports all day, every day. But where the things they're doing that are not on game day are giving them extra boost and power on game day, which is not unlike the athletes that play on the field, right? Or the coaches, right? Coaches, sure, a coach gets, criticized or patted on the back for their performance on game day. But the reality is that's 3 hours of the week. They're spending every other waking moment, game planning, breaking down film, doing all that stuff in advance to be ready for game day. So we really try to create that experience for our fans as well, where they're prepping and building themselves up to then utilize it on game day.
Yeah, I love that. So that's actually a nice segue into what's next. So fan control football, successful. The stats are tremendous. The organic growth is, it's awesome. If I had to make a guess, I would guess that your audience skews younger than most other leagues, which makes sense based on the technology. Talk to us about what is fan controlled sports and entertainment, because I'm excited about this.
Yeah, so you are exactly right. That is, I think, the big key to us is that Gen Z and even younger millennials, and certainly whatever we're calling the next generation coming, aren't, the way in which they consume content and media is very different than folks who grew up in a linear world, right? If you were born and raised in a digital environment in the last 20 years, the way in which you consume content is different. It's mobile, it's short form, it's social. And so they just aren't sitting, like, you look at any survey, any data, any metrics, the average age of viewership of traditional major sports leagues keeps getting older, and younger people are spending less and less time sitting on the couch watching a 3-hour basketball game or baseball. I mean, you see all the changes that baseball has made lately, right? To bring in shorter clock. I appreciate them doing it, but it's a very, very basic baby step into what we're trying to get at, which is that's not what people want to see. That just isn't the reality. And it's not going back the other way, right? I don't see a universe where the next generation's like, you know what? No, I do want to sit on the couch for 4 hours and lean back and watch a game and not being good. Like, that's just not how this is going. And so our focus is really on creating interactive sports and entertainment experiences that caters to that Gen Z audience. And you can see it in all of our metrics. 85% of our audience is 18 to 34. I saw something the other day. I think it was the XFL was talking about their reach, and it was like they'd had like 900 and something thousand viewers, and they were excited that 300 something thousand of them were 18 to 49. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, that means like 2/3 are over 49. Like, we are hard the opposite, right? We are, the vast majority are well under it. And so people do always ask, like, who's your competition? Is it XFL, USFL? I mean, I guess, honestly, my competition is whatever 18 to 35-year-olds are doing with their time. So it's probably more Fortnite and Call of Duty and NBA 2K than it is actually other traditional sports leagues. And so we take that mentality now and say, all right, we've done a good job with football. Still, certainly there's a lot of room for growth and opportunity there. But to have our fans engaged year round, we need to be doing more different things. And it also opens up a much broader market for us, right? American football is great in the US, doesn't really have much of a footprint globally. And we believe that part of the opportunity for us is global scale from a market and an audience standpoint. So our next thing that we are working on right now is fan controlled hoops, which will be our own and operated fan controlled basketball league that is slated to come out this summer, which will be really awesome. I know what we've been working on behind the scenes. I know what it looks like and we've been testing, and I am super excited for the rest of the world to see it. It legitimately looks and feels like NBA 2K for real life. Like, the visual of what we're doing with this interactive court and the app and game experiences, it's going to blow some people's minds, I think, when we come out with it, which is awesome. I'm very excited about that. And it's just really fun. Like, it's a very fun game to see and participate in. Basketball certainly opens up to a much broader set of international market. It also is much more friendly for the players and the types of people we can have involved in the business, male, female, young, old. Football is a little tough, right? We've had very famous NFL players who had planned to come play in our league and then watch part of it and are like, "Ooh, wait a minute, I don't want to take a hit like that anymore." And these are guys who have done it in the NFL for many years. So you can imagine a regular, like, you and I can't play in our football league, right? Like, we wouldn't last 3 plays. We would leave and have to go to the hospital. You and I can play in our basketball league. Now, we're going to get dunked on. We're going to get embarrassed. It's going to be ugly, but we'll leave. Our egos might be bruised, but we'll probably survive the game. And so I think it lends itself to a lot more opportunity. I'm not suggesting either of us should be playing in any of our leagues, but And then you start thinking about all the other kind of sports opportunities. So we've been talking a lot with, taking the learnings that we had from our proof of concept team where we played in another league and saying, all right, we know that works. We love the idea of owned and operated and full stack leagues because honestly, from a value accrual perspective, that's great, but it's also capital and resource intensive. So is there a way for us to do both effectively, giving our fans opportunity to participate in fan controlled sports year round, allowing us to R&D and test new sports, and working with other leagues who, I mean, honestly, I think could really use a lot of them. There's a lot of alternative sports leagues in golf and hockey and even basketball and football and sports that we're in that I think are missing that level of interactivity, format, content that really lends itself to the audience that I think is what they actually want to go after. So I think there's opportunities for us to partner with them to help bring our existing audience, our technology, and know-how of how to kind of execute it with other sports formats that we're probably not going to be ones building out anytime too soon.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought a lot about when I was reading up on Tomorrow Golf, what Rory and Tiger and group are doing. I mean, I immediately started to think about your technology and the integration.
I love that group. I love that team. I think what they have planned, from what I've seen, is really awesome. The venue, from what I've seen, looks amazing. And certainly, I think a lot of opportunity with folks like that to create. And golf's another one that's just so cool because of the handicapping, where again, you can make it so much more accessible to different types of personalities, people who can be there. I think there's so many natural ways in which you can gamify the gameplay experience of it to make it interactive for fans. It's one that I'm excited about.
Absolutely. And a sport like golf, a sport like tennis, some of the individual sports where the line between the best and the just didn't quite make it is so small that you still see an immense amount of talent out of athletes that aren't on the premier stage. And
I'm a huge college sports fan. I went to the U, which used to be a football school. Now we've become a basketball league, kind of like fan controlled sports. Migrating from football to basketball. Playing Duke today, big day. And even at a college like Miami, even when we were great, even when I was there and we were, the best team ever, still the majority of the guys on the football team did not make the NFL, right? But they're plenty talented enough to put on really great football on Saturdays. And it's the same thing with college basketball or, G League, other basketball. There is elite top level talent, but the MLS is not the best soccer players in the world. Not even close, right? It's not even a top 2 or 3 league in the world, but still is a great business and very entertaining. So I think there is enough global talent in sports that even if you aren't the very, very top, you can still build a really nice business, especially if you're doing things that adapt the gameplay, rules, format, experience for the fans to make it really a more entertaining product.
Yeah, that always blew my mind. I went to the Ohio State University, and same thing, right? When I was there, we were the best. We lost a couple of national championships, but it was seeing some of those athletes and trying to figure out how they couldn't play at the next level or wouldn't play at the next level was mind blowing because they were so good, and that was not a small stage. Awesome. This is it's really interesting to talk to you. We could obviously go on for a long time diving into some of the mechanics, but I think people should experience it for themselves. I do have to finish with a very interesting question to ask you. So when we kind of finish these conversations, I like to ask the guests what upstart league or call it international expansion league or sport they are most excited about or most interested in that is not either something they've invested in or their own property in this case. And I'm curious, what are you excited about?
Yeah, two come to mind. Well, you already hit one of them. Tomorrow, I'm very interested in. I just think the idea of being able to build out a centralized digital experience for golf that doesn't necessitate the physical requirements of a traditional golf, where you have to have a whole course and blah, blah, I think is fascinating, and starts to blend itself into a virtual space. Since we've already talked about that, the second one on my mind is actually a buddy of mine's business that I think is flying under the radar and probably shouldn't be. So hopefully he doesn't mind me giving him a plug. It's called Commonwealth, and it is fractional horse ownership. And they I own like a hoof of one of their horses, and anyone can buy in. I think it's like literally like as cheap as like $50 up to like thousands of dollars. And it's, all, I don't know, the reg CF or however the rules work. They've gone through all that legalese, and they're out actually getting, top-notch horses that you get to own a part in. And then they create these really awesome experiences around the big races. And they've hit. They've got a horse, this horse Country Grammar, I think, is running in to defend his Dubai Cup. He finished second in the Saudi Cup, was in like the Derby. Like within their first few horses, they've actually had a couple of like really big winners. This guy, I think this one was like the number one horse. And so I think that to me is really interesting because you're taking a sport that I don't know how many times you've been to like a racetrack that isn't like going to the Derby, cool, that's an experience, blah, blah. But like going to a racetrack on like a normal Wednesday, it's tough, right? Yeah. Like it's a pretty rough. I like sports betting, but it's a pretty rough crowd of old, salty degenerates. So the idea that you can kind of bring in, but it's a really fun sport, like horse racing, and then having a part of it, like it's a really exciting, interesting sport. And again, one that you can do without having to be the ones who have the capital to build a venue and blah, like that is a hard thing to do. So I love the idea that you could start a new business in that space, bring in a whole net new audience, and just create a different format for it where the fans literally get to participate and root along because they own a piece of that horse. So I'd say they're very interesting. And I love the idea of fan controlled anything. So fan controlled horse racing, I think it'd be a fun one coming soon. And speaking of animals, I have to throw this out because I'm seeing myself in the Glacier Boys shirt. This is like, we have really awesome engagement from our fans, right? As expected. I don't want to, obviously the point of our business is to have our fans control the team. They should really care about their favorite team. You would expect our diehard fans to be diehard, and they are, and that's awesome, and I love it. We had fans this week of the Glacier Boys. The Glacier Boys like mascot is like a sort of iced out polar bear, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And we have some diehard fans of the Glacier Boys who bought a polar bear. So it turns out there's like, some like polar bear rescue website where for some meaningful, nominal amount of money, you can buy one. And it's like a specific one. So like this polar bear has a GPS tracker. They can track him around. He's somewhere up in like northern Canada on a lake right now. And they named him after the Glacier Boys star receiver, franchise tag receiver. So each of our teams will let our fans pick each season a player they're going to give a franchise tag to, meaning he can't be drafted by anyone else. So their star receiver is guy Andrew Jamil. They've named their polar bear Andrew Jamil. So somewhere roaming around Canada is a Glacier Boy, an actual physical polar bear named Andrew Jamil. And their idea is that each year they're going to buy another one, and it'll be like their version of a Ring of Honor with like whoever their best player, franchise type player. I love that. The creativity of that. And the idea that like fans are able to do that for a team and like the player and the team can know about it and recognize it. I just think like as a sports fan, like how fucking cool is that? Like that is just so awesome. They can have that connection like that's just not something that exists in traditional regular sports. So to me, that's my fun anecdote of the week that I think it's all about, can you give the power to the fans and make them really feel a part of it? And when they are, they really care and really, fan is short for fanatic, right? Like that's what people really want to be with sports. So anywho.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hit on a lot of things. You're kind of leading the direction on the fan engagement side. Also you're, as far as I'm concerned, creating one of the most approachable Web3 environments that exists, right? I'm a big, as we've discussed, I'm a huge fan of utility as it exists in Web3 and something tangible that you can own, that you can feel, that you can touch, that you can participate in. And I think all of that is very early days, but at the end of the day, it comes down to like you just kind of gave like an old school example, right? Of owning the rights to that polar bear and naming it, right? And then kind of connecting that to the world that you guys are living in. So I'm excited to see what you do next. I also think fractional horse ownership is incredibly cool.
That's cool, right?
And if you spend a day at any track, yes, you're right. It is, be prepared. But on the other side of it, they're running all day. And it's actually you go spend a day at Saratoga, one of those tracks, like a Thursday, right? Like middle of the week, whatever. They're running all day. There's action all day. It can get any fan base involved, and you don't have to bet a ton of money, and you can still like play a role in it. So tracking your horse and kind of watching him race and feel like you're an owner there is super interesting. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what you guys do next. I'm excited for fan controlled hoops. I'm excited for you. I think that, it's amazing to see an entrepreneur whose vision, 10 years ago with a couple of buddies is coming to reality, and all of the pieces that are powering it maybe didn't exist 10 years ago, and you're leaning into those, and you're doing it in an incredibly effective way, and the numbers don't lie and the experience doesn't lie. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I do think that is a big part of it. When we first had this idea a long time ago, it was way too early. There was no iPhone and apps like that. We were far too early. I believe that we are at the right moment right now for it. I honestly think the pandemic, frankly, helped our business a lot in the early part of it, because it sort of forced people to be at home and find digital ways of connecting. I think it accelerated that. And I do think that the shifts in technology and adoption and usage of it have been so dramatic in the last half decade that it lends itself well for us. Just got to ride the wave from here, and hope we can keep making magic happen.
Awesome. We'll keep doing it. Thanks, Grant. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for the time and appreciate the overview. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, man.